You're about to hear the most twisted manipulation I've ever experienced in my 15-year marriage. My wife didn't just plan to divorce me. She orchestrated an elaborate scheme to have me declared mentally unstable, strip away my parental rights, and walk away with everything we'd built together. But what she didn't know was that I had been recording everything for months. When those recordings were finally played in court, the shock on everyone's faces, including hers, was something I'll never forget. Stay until the end because the evidence I captured will blow your mind, and this story has a lesson that could save your family too. My name is Ezra, and until 6 months ago, I thought I was living the American dream in our quiet neighborhood of Millbrook Heights. I'm a software engineer, the kind of guy who fixes computers on weekends and coaches Little League on Sundays. My wife Celeste worked as a marketing coordinator for a local real estate firm, and we had 2 beautiful kids, our daughter Iris, age 12, and our son Dorian, age 9. From the outside, we looked like the perfect suburban family. But perfection, as I learned, can be the most dangerous illusion of all. It started so subtly that I almost missed it entirely. Celeste began mentioning my forgetfulness in conversations with friends. She'd laugh it off, saying things like, "Oh, you know Ezra, he's been so scattered lately," or, "He forgot to pick up Iris again yesterday. I'm getting worried about his memory." At first, I brushed it off as harmless comments. We'd all been stressed with work and the kids' activities, but then the comments became more frequent, more pointed, and always in front of witnesses. She started questioning my decisions, my parenting, even my ability to handle basic responsibilities. When I'd confront her about it privately, she'd act confused, claiming she was just concerned about my well-being. "Maybe you should see someone, honey," she'd say with that fake sweetness that should have been my first red flag. "I think all this stress is getting to you." Little did she know, I was about to become the most documented man in divorce court history. Before this nightmare began, Celeste and I had what I genuinely believed was a solid marriage. We'd met at a tech conference in Denver back in 2009. She was representing her previous company's booth, and I was attending as a developer looking for new networking solutions. She was magnetic, confident, and had this way of making everyone in the room feel like they were the most important person there. We dated for 2 years before I proposed during a weekend getaway to Lake Tahoe. Our early years in Millbrook Heights were genuinely happy. We bought our 4-bedroom colonial on Maple Ridge Drive when Iris was just a toddler. Celeste had this talent for making our house feel like a home. She'd host neighborhood barbecues, organize play dates, and somehow manage to keep our chaos organized while maintaining her demanding career. I worked remotely 3 days a week, which meant I was heavily involved in the kids' daily routines. I'd make breakfast, help with homework, and handle most of the evening responsibilities while Celeste managed her client calls. Iris inherited her mother's social skills and was popular at Millbrook Elementary, excelling in art and drama. Dorian was more like me, quiet, thoughtful, obsessed with building elaborate Lego cities. Our weekends revolved around soccer games, family bike rides through Riverside Park, and movie nights where we'd let the kids pick increasingly ridiculous comedies. We'd have our monthly date nights at Giovanni's, the Italian place downtown where we'd had our first official date. Looking back now, I realized that Celeste's controlling tendencies were always there, carefully disguised as helpful organization. She'd subtly redirect conversations, manage social situations, and somehow always ended up making the final decisions, while making everyone feel like they'd been part of the process. I mistook this for partnership. I should have recognized it as preparation. The first crack in our seemingly perfect life appeared last February, right around Valentine's Day. Celeste had started working longer hours, claiming her real estate firm was expanding into commercial properties, and she was being considered for a promotion to senior marketing director. She'd come home after 8 p.m. most nights, exhausted and distracted, barely engaging with dinner conversations or bedtime routines. Initially, I was supportive. This promotion would mean a significant salary increase and better benefits for our family. I picked up the slack without complaint, handling more school pickups, grocery shopping, and evening activities with Iris and Dorian. But something felt off about the whole situation. When I'd ask specific questions about her projects or try to celebrate small wins, She'd become vague or changed the subject entirely. Around this time, she also started suggesting we needed better communication in our marriage and proposed we see Dr. Helena Marsh, a couples therapist she'd somehow researched and contacted without discussing it with me first. It's just preventative, she explained, like getting a yearly physical, but for our relationship. Dr. Marsh's office was in the professional building on Grandview Avenue, a sterile environment with beige walls and motivational posters that felt more clinical than comforting. During our sessions, I noticed Celeste had developed this habit of speaking for both of us, explaining our feelings and our concerns in ways that didn't quite match my experience. When I'd try to clarify or offer a different perspective, she'd give me this look, half concern, half disappointment, and say something like, "See, this is exactly what I was talking about. Dr. Marsh." Ezra seems to have trouble remembering conversations we've had or acknowledging issues we've discussed. The sessions left me feeling confused and somehow inadequate, like I was failing tests I didn't know I was taking. But I trusted Celeste, trusted that she was trying to strengthen our marriage, and assumed my discomfort was just typical therapy growing pains. Everything changed on a rainy Thursday evening in March. I'd come home early from work to surprise the family with takeout from their favorite Thai restaurant, only to find Celeste in our bedroom, having what sounded like an intimate phone conversation. She was speaking in low, warm tones I hadn't heard her use with me in months. When she realized I was home, she quickly ended the call, claiming it was her colleague Julian discussing strategy for a difficult client presentation. But something about her body language, the way she'd turned away from the door, the slight flush in her cheeks, the speed with which she'd ended the conversation, triggered every instinct I had. That night, after she'd fallen asleep, I found myself checking her phone for the first time in our 15-year relationship. What I discovered made my hands shake. The contact labeled Julian Work had a message thread filled with romantic exchanges, photos I recognized from our last anniversary trip to Napa Valley, and detailed discussions about handling the Ezra situation and making sure everything goes smoothly with the plan. There were references to my episodes and concerns about my stability around the children. Most chilling was a message from 3 days earlier. Dr. Marsh says the documentation is going well. A few more sessions, and we'll have everything we need for the custody evaluation. I sat in our kitchen until dawn, staring at screenshots I'd taken, trying to process what I was reading. My wife of 15 years was having an affair, but that wasn't even the worst part. She was systematically building a case to have me declared an unfit parent, using our marriage counselor as an accomplice, and planning to leave me with nothing while painting me as mentally unstable. Every concerned comment about my behavior, every suggestion that I was struggling with stress, every redirect during Dr. Marsh's sessions, it had all been calculated manipulation designed to create a paper trail of my supposed mental instability. That morning, I made a decision that would ultimately save my life and my relationship with my children. The next few weeks were the most difficult acting performance of my life. I had to continue our daily routines, making breakfast, helping with homework, attending Iris's school play and Dorian's science fair, while secretly gathering evidence of the conspiracy that was destroying my family. Every conversation with Celeste became a minefield where her words carried double meanings. She escalated her campaign with surgical precision. During dinner conversations, she'd ask me about events that had never happened, then express concern when I couldn't remember them. "Honey, we talked about this last Tuesday. Don't you remember discussing Iris's summer camp options?" When I'd express confusion, she'd share a worried glance with the kids, as if my memory problems were becoming a family concern. The manipulation extended to our social circle. At neighborhood gatherings, she'd make offhanded comments about my stress and forgetfulness, always framed as loving concern. "Ezra's been under so much pressure at work lately," she'd tell our neighbor Janet while organizing a block party committee. "Yesterday he forgot he'd already taken Dorian to soccer practice and was frantically calling me about where our son was." What made this particularly insidious was that Celeste would create these situations deliberately. She'd change plans without telling me, move items from their usual locations, or give me incorrect information about schedules. then document my confusion as evidence of my declining mental state. When I'd arrive at Dorian's school for a pickup that had been moved to an hour later, she'd screenshot my frantic texts asking where he was. Our therapy sessions with Dr. Marsh became increasingly focused on my alleged issues. Celeste would bring up incidents I couldn't remember or present her version of conversations that differed dramatically from mine. Dr. Marsh would take detailed notes while asking probing questions about my stress levels, sleep patterns, and ability to handle responsibilities. I began to feel like I was being evaluated rather than counseled, but every time I expressed this concern, both women would frame it as defensiveness or denial. The kids started noticing the tension. Iris began asking if Daddy was okay, and Dorian became unusually clingy during bedtime routines. By April, Celeste's psychological warfare had intensified to levels that made me question my own sanity. She'd perfected the art of gaslighting, contradicting my memories, denying conversations that had clearly happened, and presenting alternative versions of events with such confidence that I'd find myself doubting my own perceptions. The most painful part was watching how she manipulated our children. During family game nights, she'd subtly undermine my parenting decisions. If I'd set a bedtime for 9 p.m., she'd casually mention that most families let kids Iris's age stay up until 9:30, making me look unnecessarily strict. When I'd help Dorian with math homework, she'd hover nearby, occasionally correcting my explanations. She began documenting everything with her phone, creating a digital trail of my supposed incompetence. When I'd get frustrated with her contradictions, natural human reactions to being systematically manipulated, she'd quickly pull out her phone to record my outbursts. These recordings, of course, never captured the context of her provocations, only my confused and increasingly desperate responses. The affair with Julian was becoming more brazen. She'd take calls in our backyard, claiming they were work discussions that couldn't wait. She'd disappear for hours on weekends, explaining she was showing properties to demanding clients who could only meet outside normal business hours. Dr. Marsh's sessions became more invasive and one-sided. She'd ask increasingly personal questions about my childhood, my relationship with my parents, and whether I'd ever experienced episodes of confusion or anger. Celeste would chime in with carefully crafted anecdotes about my behavior, each story painting me as increasingly unstable while positioning herself as the patient, long-suffering wife. I started losing weight, sleeping poorly, and struggling to concentrate at work. The irony wasn't lost on me that their psychological manipulation was actually creating the symptoms they were claiming to document. But every time I tried to address these concerns directly with Celeste, she'd respond with that practiced look of worry and suggest I was getting paranoid. The breaking point came on a Saturday in late April, when Celeste announced she'd be spending the weekend at a marketing retreat in the mountains, leaving me alone with the kids for what she claimed was a crucial professional development opportunity. Something about her explanation felt rehearsed, and when I casually asked which resort was hosting the retreat, she became evasive and irritated. That afternoon, while Iris was at a friend's house and Dorian was engrossed in building a complex Lego spaceship, I decided to drive past Julian's apartment complex on Hillside Drive. I wasn't sure what I expected to find, but I needed to confirm what my gut already knew. Celeste's silver Accord was parked in visitor spot number 47, and through the second-floor window, I could see two figures in what was clearly an intimate embrace. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow, but what followed was even worse. When I returned home, I found Celeste's laptop open on the kitchen counter, something she'd never done before, as if she wanted me to see what was on the screen. It was a document titled, Ezra's Behavioral Patterns, Documentation for Legal Proceedings. The file contained detailed logs of every argument, every moment of confusion she'd engineered, every instance where I'd questioned her version of events. But the most devastating part was a section labeled Parental Fitness Concerns that included photos of me looking tired or frustrated, quotes taken out of context from our therapy sessions, and a timeline of alleged incidents that portrayed me as an increasingly unstable father. There was also an email thread between Celeste, Julian, and Dr. Marsh discussing strategy for the upcoming custody evaluation. Dr. Marsh had provided detailed psychological assessments based on our therapy sessions, painting me as someone with potential anger management issues and possible early-onset cognitive decline. Julian, who I learned was actually a divorce attorney specializing in high-conflict custody cases, had outlined a legal strategy designed to limit my parental rights and maximize Celeste's financial settlement. I realized I was looking at a months-long conspiracy to destroy my life, steal my children, and leave me with nothing but a reputation as an unstable ex-husband. That night, I made the decision that would ultimately save everything I cared about. That Sunday evening, I walked into our local electronics store and purchased a small digital voice recorder, the kind journalists use for interviews. I told myself I needed evidence, real proof of what was happening, because my own testimony would never stand against the coordinated manipulation I was facing. Over the next 3 weeks, I recorded virtually every interaction I had with Celeste, creating an audio diary that would eventually expose the most calculated deception I've ever witnessed. The recordings were revelatory in ways I hadn't expected. When I listened back to our conversations, I could hear the subtle manipulation tactics that I'd been too stressed and confused to catch in real time. Celeste would start discussions with false premises, redirect my responses to make me sound confused, and then express concern about my defensive behavior when I tried to clarify what had actually happened. One particularly damning recording captured her coaching our children on how to respond to questions about Daddy's behavior. I'd hidden the recorder in the living room before leaving for a quick grocery run, and when I returned, I discovered she'd used my absence to plant seeds of doubt about my stability. "You know how Daddy's been a little forgetful lately," she told Iris and Dorian. "If anyone asks you about that, it's okay to tell them the truth. We're not trying to hurt Daddy's feelings, but grown-ups need to know when someone is struggling so they can get help." The most explosive evidence came during a phone call with Julian that I recorded when she thought I was in the shower. She was in our bedroom, speaking quietly but not quietly enough. "The documentation is almost complete," she told him. "Dr. Marsh thinks we have enough evidence to demonstrate instability and potentially unsafe parenting. The kids are starting to notice his behavior, which actually helps our case." But the smoking gun was her conversation with Dr. Marsh, which I recorded when Celeste put the call on speaker while she was getting dressed for work. Dr. Marsh was explaining how the therapy notes would translate into a custody evaluation report. "His defensive responses suggest possible underlying psychological issues," Dr. Marsh said. "We can build a strong case for supervised visitation while he gets appropriate treatment." I sat in my car in the work parking lot, listening to these recordings, feeling a mixture of rage and vindication. They weren't just betraying me. They were manufacturing evidence and manipulating mental health professionals to steal my children. Armed with 3 weeks of damning recordings, I knew I needed legal representation that could match the sophistication of their scheme. I contacted Jennifer Walsh, a family law attorney whose reputation for handling complex custody cases had earned her recognition throughout the county. When I played just the first 5 minutes of my recordings during our initial consultation, her expression shifted from polite professional interest to genuine shock. "Mr. Chen," she said, pausing the audio, "what you've documented here is not just adultery and manipulation. This is systematic fraud designed to interfere with your parental rights. This woman has essentially weaponized the mental health system to build a false case against you." Jennifer explained that Dr. Marsh's participation made this particularly serious, as it represented a potential violation of professional ethics and possibly criminal fraud. We spent the next week organizing the evidence chronologically, creating transcripts of the most damaging conversations, and preparing a legal strategy that would expose their conspiracy. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Rather than wait for Celeste to make her move, we would file first, presenting the recordings as evidence of fraud, and requesting emergency temporary custody arrangements to protect the children from their mother's manipulative behavior. Meanwhile, I continued recording while maintaining the appearance of the confused, struggling husband they expected me to be. During our therapy sessions, I let Dr. Marsh lead me through her manipulative questioning while my recorder captured every word of her biased assessments. The most difficult part was watching Celeste's increased confidence as she believed her plan was working perfectly. She'd started making subtle comments about how I might need some time to work on myself and how the children would adjust to new arrangements when necessary. 3 days before Jennifer and I planned to file our papers, Celeste made her fatal mistake. During what she thought was a private phone call with Julian, she explicitly discussed their timeline for filing divorce papers and their strategy for painting me as an unfit parent during the custody evaluation. Every word was captured in crystal-clear audio, including her laugh when Julian joked about how easily they'd convinced Dr. Marsh to participate in their evidence gathering. On Thursday morning, May 15th, Jennifer and I walked into the Millbrook County Family Court building with a folder containing 47 pages of transcripts and 3 hours of audio evidence. We filed for divorce citing fraud and emotional abuse, requested emergency temporary custody arrangements, and simultaneously submitted a formal complaint against Dr. Marsh to the State Licensing Board. The initial court hearing was scheduled for the following Monday, giving Celeste and her team just 4 days to respond to evidence they had no idea existed. When Monday arrived, I watched Celeste enter the courtroom with Julian, now revealed as her attorney rather than just her lover, and Dr. Marsh, who'd been subpoenaed to explain her role in the conspiracy. Judge Rebecca Torres, a no-nonsense jurist with 30 years of family law experience, listened to Jennifer's opening statement with increasing concern. When she began playing the first recording, the one where Celeste coached the children about my supposed mental instability, you could see the shock register on everyone's faces. Celeste went pale. Julian frantically shuffled through papers as if looking for a defense that didn't exist. And Dr. Marsh visibly flinched when her own voice filled the courtroom discussing therapy notes with a client's spouse. The second recording, where Celeste and Julian discussed their timeline for destroying my reputation and custody rights, caused an audible gasp from the court reporter. Judge Torres stopped the playback and asked if the defense needed a moment to confer, but Julian simply shook his head, apparently realizing there was no defense against evidence this damning. When Dr. Marsh was called to testify, she attempted to explain her actions as legitimate therapeutic interventions, but the recordings made her lies impossible to maintain. Under oath, she was forced to admit that she'd shared confidential therapy notes with Celeste, helped plan manipulative scenarios to test my reactions, and prepared psychological assessments based on deliberately false information. The courtroom drama reached its peak when Judge Torres addressed Celeste directly. "Mrs. Chen, the evidence presented suggests you engaged in systematic psychological manipulation of your husband, while simultaneously alienating your children from their father through calculated deception. This court finds your actions constitute emotional abuse and attempted fraud of the family court system." Celeste's composure finally cracked as the judge announced her preliminary ruling. Temporary full custody to me, supervised visitation for her, and a recommendation for criminal investigation into the conspiracy between all 3 defendants. The aftermath moved swiftly once the truth was exposed. Dr. Marsh's license was suspended pending a full investigation, and she eventually faced criminal charges for fraud and professional misconduct. Julian was reported to the State Bar Association and faced his own professional consequences for his role in the conspiracy. But the most important resolution was what happened with my children. Judge Torres ordered immediate family therapy with a court-appointed psychologist to help Iris and Dorian understand what had happened and repair the damage their mother's manipulations had caused. Dr. Sarah Kim, our new therapist, specialized in parental alienation cases and helped the kids process their confusion. The hardest conversation was explaining to 12-year-old Iris and 9-year-old Dorian why Mommy wouldn't be living with us anymore and why our family was changing so dramatically. I chose honesty appropriate to their ages, explaining that their mother had made some very poor choices that hurt our family. Iris, with her natural emotional intelligence, seemed to understand more than she initially let on. "I knew something was weird," she told me during one of our new evening talks. "Mommy kept asking strange questions about you, and it felt like she wanted me to say bad things. I didn't like it." The divorce proceedings concluded within 3 months, with Celeste receiving minimal assets and limited supervised visitation rights. The court determined that her calculated deception and manipulation disqualified her from shared custody, and the evidence I'd gathered proved she'd forfeited her right to marital property through fraud. She moved out of state shortly after the final decree, accepting a job transfer that conveniently removed her from the daily drama her actions had created. My relationship with the kids grew stronger than it had ever been. Without Celeste's constant undermining and manipulation, our home became peaceful again. We established new routines, rebuilt trust, and slowly healed from the trauma of her betrayal. The voice recorder that had saved our family now sits in my desk drawer, a reminder of the importance of trusting your instincts and protecting the people you love. 6 months later, as I tell this story, Iris and Dorian are thriving in ways that remind me why fighting for the truth was worth every difficult moment. Iris has returned to her confident, artistic self, and Dorian has started a robotics club at school, something he'd been too anxious to pursue during the chaos of last spring. The experience taught me several crucial lessons that I hope might help others facing similar situations. First, trust your instincts when something feels fundamentally wrong in your relationship, even if you can't immediately identify what's happening. The subtle feeling that conversations aren't quite right often signals deeper problems that need investigation. Second, documentation is absolutely critical when dealing with manipulative behavior. Without those recordings, my word against Celeste's coordinated campaign would have resulted in the loss of my children and my reputation. Sometimes protecting yourself requires gathering evidence that feels uncomfortable. But when someone is systematically working to destroy your life, traditional relationship trust becomes a luxury you can't afford. Third, professional manipulation, whether by therapists, attorneys, or other authority figures, can be exposed when you have concrete evidence of their misconduct. Dr. Marsh's betrayal was only provable because I captured her actual words, rather than relying on my interpretation of her behavior. Most importantly, I learned that some people are capable of devastating betrayal while maintaining a facade of love and concern. Celeste didn't just cheat on our marriage. She orchestrated a months-long campaign to steal my children while portraying herself as a devoted mother, concerned about her husband's mental health. Today, Iris is excelling in middle school drama productions. Dorian has built a Lego city that covers half our basement, and I wake up each morning grateful for the courage I found to fight for the truth. The woman who tried to destroy our family ultimately revealed the strength I didn't know I had, and the unbreakable bond I share with my children. Sometimes the most important battles are the ones you never expected to fight. If this story helped you or you know someone who might be facing similar manipulation, please share it. And remember, trust your instincts, document everything, and never give up fighting for the truth. Thanks for watching.